Hello. So let's get started. My name is Quinn, and today, as asked by Kehan, I'm giving this lecture. Actually, I do see quite some familiar faces. Brian, Octavia, Naji. I hope this will not be boring to you. Okay. So this lecture is mainly about the causal representations. So we have been doing causality, mainly in causal discovery and causality-based machine learning for some time. And today you are going to see how we can make sure we have causal representations. And then what?
So could you speak up a little bit? Or that's not amplified. Just have to speak louder.
Oh.
Okay.
You cannot hear. Okay, got it. So, and another thing is how to make use of causal graph, causal representations, right? So, and later, if needed, we'll talk about something different, including how to discover causal information from data and how to do machine learning from the causal perspective. So, for today, what's the difference between dependence or conditional dependence or independence and causality? So basically, this caricature explained my experience. A long time ago, whenever I saw strong correlation or strong dependence, I tended to think that there was some causal relation, right? When we were very young, this happened all the time. Later, after taking some classes, especially some statistics classes, I got to know causation implies correlation, but the correlation does not imply causation. It's true, right? Very informative. However, it's too strong. It's unnecessarily too strong. In fact, now we can say this, in almost all situations, you can find a causation from dependence patterns. Okay, so now we become very optimistic about this. What's the difference between causation and dependence? Here you can see, we say two variables, x and y, are associated if and only if they are basically dependent. This is not working. And we say x is the cause of y if and only if this holds true. This condition holds true. Oh, what's wrong with it? I think there's some problem. Oops, all the slides are not completely. So we say x is the cause of y if and only if a certain way of change in x could change the value or the distribution of y, right? Here I use do. Later I will explain what do means here. Now you can see the very difference between association and causality. If x causes y, clearly they are dependent. There's something missing here. I don't know why.
Keynote, you're using PowerPoint, so I don't know why it's not working.
Mysterious word. Okay, so here should be the last condition should be probability of do of y given do x equal to x2, a different value for x. So you can see if x is the cause of y, clearly they are dependent. Why? Because there exist different values of x corresponding to different distribution of y. They are dependent, right? However, if they are associated or if they are dependent, it's not necessary to have this. Clearly, we know causation is stronger than correlation or dependence. This is the definition of dependence, right? Not just correlation. So, what do we mean by causality? How can we find the causality? How can we make sure it's causal, right? Those problems have been puzzling a lot of people for so long, at least 2,500 years from Aristotle. So let's see how we can solve the problem. Before that, let's have a look at some examples. Did you watch the Australian Tennis Open last week? This is a piece of news I found last week. Basically, they published the paper. The conclusion is as follows. When the impact of the grunt is investigated, there's evidence that hitting performance is enhanced. Secured university tennis players were found to hit with a 3.8 increase in ground stroke hitting velocity when they grunt. Basically, they tried to give a causal claim. They said, oh, if you grunt, then the hitting speed will be higher, right? They tried to give this claim. That's why this study looks meaningful. Do you agree? Actually, I looked into the paper. No evidence. There's no evidence to support that, right? You tend to think of this causally. By the way, do you believe this? Do you think this is true? Grunting will increase the heating speed? Yes or no? Yes? No. Yes, okay. Fortunately, not so many people believe so. Otherwise, if you go to the chemistry field, you will hear a lot of unnecessary grunting, right? So that's good. Basically, I don't believe this is the case. Actually, maybe you can give an explanation why this is not the case.
I mean, it could be possible that there's reverse causation as well, right? When you hit something, you heat yourself and you grunt.
Or in other words, basically, it's very likely to have a common cause, sometimes trying to play hard, right? If you try to play hard, it's likely, very likely for you to grunt. At the same time, the heating speed will be higher. So there are so many examples like that. But because there are some good studies, this is a very good study. Very interesting paper, very surprising. They said the large-scale psychological differences within China can be explained by rice versus wheat agriculture. Okay, so if you farm, basically people who farm rice and people who farm wheat could have very different psychological psychological states. Clearly, we cannot do any experiment, right? You have to analyze observations, observe the data points. You can collect data points all over the world, all over China. You just need to, and you have no way, right? You have no other way. You can only analyze the data, and then they could really give such a very strong conclusion. When we talk about the causal discovery, learning causal relation, we will come back to this example. And you can see that actually, yes, it's reasonable. Okay. Another last example. Here, x-axis is the chocolate consumption per year per capita for different countries. And the y-axis is the number of Nobel laureates per 10 million people. Very nice relationship, very nice positive correlation. Right? You can see that the correlation coefficient is very high, 0.78 something. So you really want to think, you really want to figure out why this is the case, right? Otherwise, maybe you just buy a lot of chocolate and distribute the chocolate every day. That's not sensible, right? We really want to find the causal relations and make use of causal relations. So in particular, in this class, I will start with causal thinking. What we can benefit from causal thinking. Thinking causal. Caring about the underlying process behind the data, behind the observations. And then I'll talk about the causal graphical representations. And you can see clearly we have to use the graphical representations, especially directed graphical models, to represent the causal relations. However, it's stronger. Causal representation is stronger. And you can see the condition to make sure this is a causal representation, not just a Bayesian network. And then in this time, I will talk about the interventions. Basically, you can see how we can represent the interventions and how we can make use of interventions. And then there are two main tasks in this field. One is how to identify the causal effect. Suppose I change something here, I intervene on something here. I want to see the effect. This is called causal effect. We have to find a way to see whether this is identifiable and how to do so. And second problem is causal discovery. We have been working on this problem for very long. And yes, this is a very interesting problem. And people are making very quick progress, and it's very exciting. So at some point later, we'll talk about this causal discovery, as well as how to make use of causality for machine learning. And then finally, I will very briefly talk about how to understand the cycles in the representations. We always have cycles, right, in the world. That's why it's so complicated. So how can we understand the causal cycle representation in the causal graph? Causal thinking. This is a classical example discussed by Fisher in the 1950s. So clearly you can see a high correlation or dependence between the color of the finger, yellow finger, and lung cancer or lung disease. The correlation at that time, the correlation was very high. Okay, so they didn't have a way to whitening the fingers. Basically, you can see very high correlation over here But if you want to change the incidence of lung cancer, what can you do? Clearly, you cannot rely on the dependence. You have to go back to find the cause. Here, smoking might be a main cause for both of them, right? So here you can see, for some particular tasks, we definitely cannot rely on dependence or correlation. We have to go back to the physical world, to the true world, something ontological. So basically, if you want to do control, advertisement, or develop a recommended system, you have to make use of the causal representation, causal process. Clearly, if you want to advertise some new products, you have to know how the advertisement will change people's mind, right? And finally, improve the revenue. It's not just a correlation. And also because of this, you can see we can easily do information fusion. Just consider this example. Suppose we know in one world, we just care about the correlation. So we know X, Y correlated, Y, Z correlated. Now we want to have a big picture regarding all those variables. What's the relationship between X and Z? You have no idea. They can be identical, they can be independent, right? Is that clear? So if you just care about the correlation or dependence, you cannot easily integrate information from different aspects, right? But if you have causal information, you can easily do so. Suppose I know X causes Y, and then suppose later I know Y causes Z. I know X causes Y causes Z. I know this is the chain. I know X is actually also a cause for Z, not a direct cause, right? So I can have a clearer picture, clearer picture of the whole system. That's why we care about the causal thinking. And actually, if you read Carl Jung, someone knows, good. So according to his theory, causal thinking really gave rise to modern science in the Western societies. Okay, another example. This is a true real data set collected in the 1970s. Here you can see something very interesting. Why? Suppose we have patients, we have kidney stone patients, basically they have kidney stones. For one group of them, they have small stones, and you can see treatment A is better with a higher recovery rate, right? If I cannot use this, maybe I should use my pointer. So you can see for the small stone group, A is better. And for the larger ones, A is also better. The recovery rate is higher, always higher. However, they found that if they just combine all patients together as a single data set, big data set, treatment B is better. Actually, you can really calculate this from those numbers, number of patients who recovered, and so on. You can really calculate those numbers. And you can see that if you don't care about the stone size, treatment B seemed better. Now comes the question. Suppose now a new patient just come to you, and you have to give a recommendation. Would you recommend A or B? A? Okay, A, B? You recommend both A and B? No. Okay. Good. So, come on, you are doctors. You should give recommendation.
The estimator for the probability when you marginalize over the stone size is not a consistent estimator, because if I have, it may not be the true probability, because the number of patients who have in group 4 are much lesser, so you won't have the right estimate.
So which one would you recommend?
A.
A. Basically, you are not using dependence, right? You are using something like causal effect. That's a very good point. We'll talk about this. Exactly, that's the point. So you cannot make recommendations only based on dependence or correlation, right? You have to go back to something. Clearly here, we should recommend A. Why? Because if the stone is small, I would recommend A. If the stone is large, I would also recommend A. The stone can only be small or large, right? It's not meaningful at all to recommend B. There's no situation where you should recommend B, right? Okay. Another example, very similar. So here, x-axis is X size, Y is cholesterol. So we believe that the more X size you do, the less cholesterol you are going to have. That's good. Actually, this is the case for different groups of people at different ages, 10, 20, and so on. If this is the case, that's good. But if you combine the data, if you put them together, you can see a very nice positive correlation between X size and cholesterol. Right? If I don't try to go further, I will say, oh, the more exercise I do, the more cholesterol I will have. Why? Why should I do exercise? Clearly, this is wrong. What caused the problem? I'm not used to this. So here you can see the problem. The stone size, basically, how you divide the patient into groups, will influence treatment and recovery. This is the problem. It's a common cause. And here it's missing. It's a missing common cause. If this guy is missing, then the dependence pattern between them can be almost arbitrary. This dependence does not reflect anything about the causal influence of treatment and recovery. But whenever you give recommendation, you rely on causal effect because you want to change something, right? Okay. In particular, here you can see the following thing. For A, this is a small stone. For A, better, B, worse, right? That's good. For large stones, A better, B is worse. That's very good. However, finally, you take the average, right? Weighted by the normal patients, if you want to find the average. Here, unfortunately, we have more people. I forgot it. This is not yet. Unfortunately, for the people in the with the large stones, it's very likely to receive treatment A. That's why over here you can see that they are close. And for people with small stones, it's more likely for them to receive treatment B. That's why after taking the average, you can see, oh, this one becomes higher, right? This is because the weight for you to take the average also depends on this guy. If you cut this edge, if they are independent, then we don't have this issue at all, right? Later we'll come back to this example, and you can see how we can solve the problem. Now, let's have a look at another kind of strange dependence. Let's go back 50 years in America. Then, at the university, you can find a very strange phenomenon. On average, female students are smarter than male students at that time. Why? This is the typical issue. Yeah, basically we have to make use of data collected on internet, right? You have to collect data, and you can see how the way you collect data could influence the final conclusion. Please.
There's probably more barriers for females to enter college, so only the top portion of female entry college.
Excellent. So basically, although across the country, they are independent. I think so. They are independent, gender and IQ. However, now you are analyzing the relationship given the common effect admitted to college. Given this, they become dependent. Now, another example related to this. Monte Hall problem. Clearly, you know, all of you know Monte Hall problem. If all of you know this problem, I can skip this part. You know this, right? Everyone know this? Okay. I listen to you. So here you can see the problem. The host is Monte Hall, and the game is run as follows. You, as a participant, choose one of the doors. There are 3 doors, A, B, C. Say door A. You have no information, right, regarding where the money is. Basically, behind one of the doors, there's $1,000. Behind the other two, there's nothing. So suppose you choose A. Now, as a host, Monty opened the door that is not the door you choose. Say, suppose he opened B. Would you like to stick with your original choice, which is A, or change your mind? You said you change your mind. Stick with A? Would you like to stick with A? No, no one. Would you like to change your mind to C? Okay, good. Let's go. So basically, given your initial choice and where the money is, right, are independent. You have no idea, right? When you make the decision, you have no idea about where the money is. However, which door to be opened by Monty is a causal effect. Given this guy, they become dependent. That means you should rethink about your choice, your decision, right? Okay. So to summarize, there are three ways to produce dependence. First, if you have a common cause, clearly you can have dependency between those two things, which are not really causally related. The second thing is to have a causal influence from A to B. Then you have a dependence between A and B. And the final thing is the dependence caused by common effect. This is very important nowadays because we have to deal with the data all the time. Whenever you deal with the data, it's likely to have this problem because you have to select the data, right? Or the system has to select data in some way. If you go to the hospital to collect data, basically it's biased. And here you can see another problem. Why do we care about the machine? Why do we care about the causality? Even if I just want to make a prediction, only prediction. I don't want to make any change of the world. So still we care about the causality. Try to figure out what's behind this problem, this example. Suppose this is me. I go to a completely new environment. Okay, now from my shadow, I think it's easy for you to predict a lot of properties of my figure, including how tall I am, right? And you can even predict where the light is from. From the effect, which is the shadow, you can predict a lot of things about the cause in a completely new environment, right? For which you have no idea about. You have no idea at all. Is that clear? By making use of your own experience, you can really make good prediction in this case. However, if I ask you to predict the shadow from my figure, can you do so? In a new environment where you have no idea where the light is from. Yeah, good. You said no, right? No. Okay, so clearly you can see now, if you want to make prediction in non-stationary environments, you care about the asymmetric information, which can be easily described by causality. To make it very short, when you predict in changing environments, predicting cause from effect is very easy, but predicting effect from cause could be very hard or impossible. That's why we really care about causality to achieve intelligence. Why? If you want to achieve intelligence, clearly you cannot just handle the ideal case. You have to deal with the real case, where almost everything can change, right? If you have self-driving car, how can you ensure that all situations, basically you don't have any new situation? It's not possible. You can always have new situations. You can always have a changing environment. What can we do? What can we rely on, right? Okay. To summarize, here we can see the difference between causal thinking or causality and dependence. By making use of causality, we can do active manipulation, the control. And if you don't make use of causality, you can do passive prediction. In the stationary case, you assume the distribution given is fixed. Otherwise, you still need to make use of causality. That's another point. So if you want to do generalization or adaptation, you should care about something that is invariant, right? That is about causality. And with causality, we can easily integrate the information from different aspects, as you can see from this example. And finally, you can think, if you want to think more broadly, causality is related to creativity, counterfactual reasoning, a lot of stuff. So what's the creativity? If you want to be creative, you have to have two capacities. One, we care about this question, what if question. What if something had been different? You want to see the virtual outcome of another world, right? That's why you can do comparison. You can see which way is better, which method is better, which choice is better. Well, this is the counterfactual reasoning. At the same time, you should have the ability to do knowledge integration or information fusion, so that you have the ability to answer such questions. If you are good at both of them, it's easy for you to be creative, because you want to make a difference. You have the ability to make a difference. Okay. Any questions? No. Good. So now let's have a look at the causal graphical representation. You already learned the Bayesian networks and other graphical representations. So here, you can see some subtle difference. What's the classical way for us to find the causal information? Clearly, you cannot simply say, oh, if x and y are dependent, then x causes y. You cannot say so. So how can you make sure this is causal? Consider examples. Raining, wet grass. We know this guy is cause and this is effect, right? We know that. Why? Sometimes we have the temporal precedence information. But here, usually I just ignore temporal information, because in many situations, temporal information is just lost because of the very low resolution of the data, right? So we don't have temporal information. We don't know all this happened before this guy happens. However, you can imagine the following thing. If I have a way to force this to happen, this will happen, right? If I have a way to force this to happen without changing this guy will not be changed by that at all, right? In many situations, according to our experience, we can answer such questions. We can imagine the effect of those changes, and then you can identify causal information. Second example, hot weather, high sales of ice cream. Whenever I can force it to be very hot, this will be changed. But I can find a way to increase the sales of ice cream, and this one will not be changed at all. Say I can hire a lot of people, right, to buy ice cream. This will be changed, but this one will not be changed. That's why I know, oh, this one causes this guy. So now, look at the last example. Suppose this guy goes to work by bus in the morning. At 8:30, the bus is coming, and at the same time, the guy is leaving home. The two events seem to be related. Is there a direct causal relation between them? Are they directly causally related? Yeah.
Potentially, if the man is trying to get a specific bus at a specific time.
Yeah. You mean the man is leaving home basically at 8:30, just at according to the time. So the man cannot see the bus is coming. Basically, suppose there is no window. The man cannot see the bus coming. In this case, is there a direct causal relation between them? No, right? Because I just basically, from what I just said, there are no direct causal relation. I cannot see the bus. The bus cannot see me, right? So that's why there are no direct causal relation. However, we have a very strong coincidence. Why? You can see there are no direct causal relation by, again, imagining some interventions, some changes. Suppose this guy is leaving home. Suppose this guy is about to leave home. I just locked the door. The bus will still come, right? And suppose I can have an ugly way to stop a bus. I just jump in from the bus. Okay? The bus will stop, hopefully. but the guy will leave home as usual, right? You can see clearly by making use of those actions, those changes, you can identify causal relations. This is because we are familiar with the process, we are familiar with the physical world. Given data, we have no idea about this. We have to find other ways to find causal relation. Clearly here, basically, there's a common cause, the timetable, right? The bus and the person, both of them basically just follow the timetable. Now you can see the following thing. If I change timetable, in order to change the first event, when the bus will come, this event will also be changed. Right? If I just change something and then see the effect of the change, I cannot find a causal relation, because if I change this guy this way by changing the timetable, the other event will also happen. That means intervention is not just a change. Intervention is much, much stronger. First of all, we can make use of interventions to find the causal information. If you intervene on X and find a change in Y, you say X causes Y. Second of all, intervention is much, much stronger in the following sense. If you want to intervene on X, you can only change X in the system. You have to leave every other variable unchanged, at least for now. And then you can see the effect of this particular change. This is the definition of intervention. And you can see how difficult it is. Why? How can I find a way to change only X without changing any other variable? If I don't know anything about the physical process, how can I do this? Right? That's why people believe that the definition of intervention and the definition of causation or causality are circular. If you know causality, if I know how X changes Y, I can find a way to apply intervention. If I know how to apply intervention, basically I know causal information, because I know a way to change only this particular random variable without changing any other variable. For instance, if I believe X and Y are directly causally related, and suppose I have a way to intervene on Y without changing X, then I'm sure that X causes Y, not the other way around. Right? That's why the two things are circular. However, conceptually, understanding intervention is very important. Especially if we are given causal representation, we can directly represent and derive something from interventions. Bayesian networks are just DAGs with some probability, right? So here we just care about the causal the graphical representation. You can always catch probabilistic information. What do I mean by a causal DAG? First of all, it's a DAG. Later we can generalize this. It's not necessary to be acyclic, but for now, let's assume it's acyclic. The directed acyclic graph. How can I be sure it's causal representation? Think this way. Suppose I have a causal representation. X causes Y, and then Y causes Z. Suppose this is the case. Then how can I represent the intervention on Y? Oh, in this example, we have a fit here. Suppose this is the causal representation, representing causal information of the two worlds. How can I represent the intervention on X3 sprinkler? How can I do so? According to the definition of intervention, right? I don't care about anything that influences this guy. I just simply change the value, this variable, I set this variable to some particular value, right? When I do intervention, I just discard the causal process for this particular random variable. I change the value of this variable. That's intervention. That means when you intervene on X3, X1 will not influence X3 anymore, because you cut the causal process. You use another way to set the value of X3, right? So if I have a causal representation, I can represent the causal intervention. And furthermore, if this is the causal representation, after the intervention on X3, there is no reason for other things in the system to change, to be changed by that. Because when I do intervention, I only change this particular random variable locally. Other causal processes are the conditional distributions or dependent relations will not be changed by this intervention. Yeah.
Can you say again why you need to know the causal relations to be able to do a meaningful intervention? Because I mean, you can just turn on or turn off the sprinkler.
So
Any causal knowledge.
the purpose is as follows. We want to find a way to characterize causal DAGs. You want to find the conditions under which a DAG must be a causal DAG, right? You want to answer this question. How can you do so? You have to start with the causal representation and see the properties of the causal representation. Now I'm trying to make it clear what you can benefit from causal representations. So that's why I assume we are giving causal representations. And then you can see something very nice. And then you can see that by enforcing those things, we can guarantee the graphical representation is a causal representation. Clear to you? Okay. So if this is intervention, if I just change this random variable in a particular way, there's no reason for other things, for this link, and so on, for those things to be changed at all, right? Because of modularity. We like causal systems. Why? Because if the world is causal, I just care about the subsystem, and those subsystems are independent, are separated. That's why we can build very big airplanes, right? There are so many modules. Those modules are not coupled. They are separated. You can deal with each of them independently. Here, if you change some here, those things will not change. That means I can still factorize the joint distribution according to the graph, new graph. The new graph is this one. The new graph is here. Why? If I intervene on 3, this link will disappear because I cut all those edges into this particular random variable, right? I have this representation, and then I know that this is a valid graph to represent the effect of this intervention. I can still make use of the previous independence and conditional independent relations, right? Apart from this independence caused by intervention. Now, you can see how we can make sure this is the causal representation. Suppose you are given a graph. First, let Pxv be the distribution of V with a set of random variables, resulting from intervention what you do to represent intervention. So you set the value, you do. Physics practice in our department uses set. UDL Perl uses do. So do or set basically mean the same thing. Do x equal to small x. So you just set the value of x to small x. That's it. And then this is the distribution of the after intervention. You have a DAG. Then you can say this DAG is a causal DAG if those 3 conditions hold true. The first condition says that this distribution is still Markov relative to the original graph. This means after I do intervention, the independence and conditional independent relation will be the same. I think you talked about the Markov property, right? So, and the second one is that if I intervene on something, then the value is fixed. So the probability will be 1. If I set the value of x to small x, then probability for capital X to be small x is 1. This is trivial. And the last thing is interesting. So the probability in the manipulated distribution, new distribution, the probability of Vi, any variable given the parents, is the same as the previous one. This means the intervention can only change the value of this particular random variable without changing anything else in the system, in the DAG. So if those 3 conditions hold true, we say this is the causal graph, causal DAG. Okay? And then we can rely on the causal representation to do something more advanced to me.
So, can I use this to test if it's something causal DAG or not?
Yeah, however, usually it's not possible. Because how can you find the distribution after interventions? You have to do interventions.
Right, let's assume I can do an intervention.
Yeah.
If I do intervention and then I see that some of the CPDs are changing, then it means that my previous one was not that. Right? It was cause of that.
Exactly. Yeah. If you have intervention, actually you can find the causal DAG. That's why, right? Again, this is circular, but conceptually this is very clear, right? To be sure that the DAG is a causal DAG, those three conditions hold true. That also means if you are given a causal DAG, those properties will hold, and you can derive something interesting from those properties. Okay. Now, what is the distribution of 1, 2, 4, 5 after intervention on X3 to set X3 to on? Basically, this is the meaning of this distribution. Can you write it down? If you can write it down, you can basically easily find the effect of interventions, right? Because you just need to do inference, Bayesian inference on a new graph, given something that already happened. Can you write this down? What's this probability? You intervened on X3. Now you want to see the effect. You want to see the distribution of the remaining variables. Anybody here? So just make use of those rules. One will not be changed because this is an empty set, right, for 1. So Px1 is the same as the previous one, Px1. 2 given 1 will not be changed according to condition 3. And now you have new graph, right? So you have Px1 times 2 given 1 times 4 given 1 and 2 and 3, yeah, right, 3 and 2. However, now you know this value. This is fixed. And then 5 is determined by 4. So this is how you can simply find this distribution after interventions, giving a causal DAG. Okay. So to make it very short, with causal representation, we can either represent and infer the effect of interventions. Then you can see, you can answer the following question: oh, should I make the change? Right? Before you make the change, you should see the effect of change. Now, if you can evaluate the effect of change, you can make the right decision. And even if you don't want to make the interventions or change the system, you can still benefit from causal representation. Why? I hope this is already pretty clear to you because of the previous example. Figure shadow. Over here, you don't want to change anything. However, causal representation always provides a compact description of the properties of the joint distribution. You know how to factorize the joint distribution. And you know that those terms in the factorized joint distribution are not related. This is so cool. This is called modularity. Because of this, you can see the following thing. Consider this example. We have a causal structure, y causes x. Causal representation is stable in the sense that if y causes x, then there must exist a process in the world so that y can change x step by step. So you can always trust this. This is something invariant. However, you can observe a lot of distributions, different distributions for x and y in different locations across different countries. Over time, right, you can observe so many different distributions because the world is heterogeneous or non-stationary, right? We always have some background variables we cannot capture. So in this case, you can see without making use of the causal representation, something here, so difficult for you to go from a single distribution to another one. You have no idea about the change. You have no idea regarding how to combine information or how to leverage the information collected over here and to solve other problems, right? However, with this causal structure over here, you have a bridge. With this bridge, you can find some information, specific information here, some specific information here, and so on. And you can just jump from a single distribution to solve other distributions. Right? This is the fundamental problem in transfer learning. Okay. Questions? Yeah.
Could you repeat that part again? The last one.
Sorry, I can hear.
Could you repeat the last part again? Like when you
So-
said you can jump from.
So basically, if you don't have this, you have no idea how they are different, right? If you don't have this bridge, you have no idea about the difference between different distributions, right? Think of some transfer learning problems, right? The distribution, the joint distribution just changes. You have no idea about how it changes. However, if I know this, then this is the bridge, because the causal representation gives a lot of constraints on the distributions. Remember, right? You have causal representation, then you have modularity, and so on. Actually, at some point, maybe I should make this clearer. We can benefit from causal representation at least in 3 aspects. But for now, just understand the problem this way. If you have this, right? This can generate different distributions with different specifications, with different parameterizations, right? If I know this, then I can try to infer something about the parameterization over here, and then I can go from here to another distribution. This is just a bridge, right? Why? Let me make it more specific. If y equals x, we mean the following thing. The process y equals x, the process that generates y is completely irrelevant to the process that generates x from y. The two processes are completely separated. This means they don't share any parameter. They can be parameterized separately, right? And in very extreme cases, one of them can be fixed. If probability of y is fixed, and the condition distribution of x and y can change, right? This is what's that? Basically, this is called the conditional shift in our papers. And if the distribution of y can change, and this process that cannot change from y to x, this is called target shift. You know, this is the extreme case of independence. If they are independent, and one of them is fixed, then they are always independent, right? However, if you decompose the joint distribution in a different way, suppose y equals x. Now, suppose I decompose the joint distribution as px, behind py gives x, right? Looks equivalent. However, now the two modules are heavily dependent. They share a lot of information. And if px gives y, the causal process is fixed, you can see that the conditional distribution of y gives x will not be fixed. Everything is changing. How can you solve the problem? Okay?
I was just going to ask, like, you don't necessarily need the causal structure, right? Because you can always, like, in the non-parametric model to all the distributions to just get a generator of, like to get a representation of what's going on.
Very good point. Okay. Go ahead, you.
I just mean, like,
Yeah, I know that.
you need to have a causal
Yeah.
structure, and I'm saying that
This is a very important view. However, you made a lot of assumptions, right? First of all, basically you can use something like deep learning to solve the problem, right? I just want to. But deep learning, at first you have a lot of data. Second of all, more importantly, you always assume that the data you have covered all possible situations. You cannot do extrapolation at all with deep learning. But this way, you don't care. Why? Because I have this ground truth. I can always make use of it. All those distributions could be totally different from what I have from what I observed before. But with deep learning, you cannot do so. Right? You just find some data-driven way to make prediction. But if something changes relative to what you have already obtained, you have no idea regarding how to do adaptation. This is basically a classical problem in learning, right? You care about the model complexity and fitting performance on the given data. That's why we really care about structure, complexity. With this, the complexity is so low. Is this the answer to the question? Okay.
So, other question, I guess, like with what you said in different examples. So let's say that I want to develop a system that is like based on a camera, and I want to detect monitor people if people are fighting with each other or not. and let me decompose it into a variable that detects a person or if they are fighting or not. And I want to have a system that works in Pittsburgh, which is always cloudy, and California that's always sunny mostly. So if I build my network like CNN that works here with the distribution of the Pittsburgh, I cannot really deploy it in California because distribution changes.
Exactly.
In this context, my question is that, are you saying that it's more advantageous to learn PX, X image, why they're fighting, to learn X given X given Y, or Y given X?
So in this,
Which one is advantageous for this application? That
in this case,
building system that works everywhere.
can you say the mean of X and Y?
Let's say X is image that goes through bunch of submodules.
Yeah, Y is basically the concept of, say, fighting. So in this case, clearly, the problem is as follows. The process, clearly, Y causes X. We have a reason, right, for that. Unfortunately, the probability of the image given fighting also changes. This is called a conditional shift in our papers. So you have to find a way to model the changes. Then there's no problem. That's why actually we have been combining causal representation and deep network to solve such problems. We know the structure, and then for some of the modules we can use deep learning, right, to make it very flexible. That's it. Yes, the answer is okay. Okay, good. Oh, just a second.
Suppose we have two random variables, x1 and x2.
Yeah.
And consider all the possible combinations of those random variables. So if you analyze them, you see that they are independent.
Sorry, I didn't get it. So you have two variables x and y, and all possible.
And you just consider all possible combinations.
Combination of
Values of x1 and x2.
So when you are given observation, basically you are given data pairs, right? First point xy, second point xy. So what do you mean by combination of x?
All possible pairs.
So by that you mean you have a lot of data.
No, I'm not considering about the data. Just think about all the possible pairs, all the feasible points.
Okay, distribution. Basically, this gives you a distribution of x, y, right?
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And if we look at the distribution, we see that both are independent. But suppose some of the points in the distribution, they happen with probability 0. So in real life, we will only have points from non-zero probability, right? But if we analyze the points only with non-zero probability, we find that they are not independent. They are like correlated. So how do we discover the independence? This kind of situation?
How can you discover the dependence in the case where you have data point, you miss the data points, which make them dependent? Is that your question? Is that what you asked?
We only got data points which make them dependent.
You have data points to make them dependent.
Yes.
Okay.
But actually they are independent. So some scientists might think that yes, something is causing, either X is causing Y or Y is causing X, or they're very correlated. But in reality, they may be totally unrelated.
Yeah. So this is if this is the case, suppose you are not talking about finite sample size effect. Suppose you have enough data. Okay.
Suppose even if we have infinite data.
Yeah. You have enough data. Now X and Y are dependent, and you believe they are not dependent.
Okay.
Right? Is that what you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
This is the selection problem. Remember, age and IQ are dependent if you believe they are not dependent. But for college students, they are dependent. Right? And what's your final goal? What's your final goal? You want to go back to
I want to understand how they are related.
Excellent. Excellent. This is a very good question. So actually, we have some papers on this. To make it very short, in this case, you have something like selection. Because of the selection procedure, you make them dependent. Now, you can further, if you believe they are independent, you can recover the property of the original population in which they are independent from the biased selected data points. By making use of causal representation, clearly you have to do so. Since you are, I don't think this can be recorded, but still I think I should make this very clear. When we say selection, we mean the following thing. Remember that example. We have age, IQ, college, right? Over here, we only observe data points corresponding to this value. Yes, this happened. C equal to 1. So you always have data points generated by this distribution. Everything you see, all data points, or actually generated by this distribution. You want to infer something without this. Right? Now this is clearly defined. And with some further assumptions, you can easily go from this conditional distribution to the distribution without this conditional variable.
We should observe all possible combinations of the condition.
Oh no, you cannot. The problem is you cannot observe any data point corresponding to this.
Yeah. If we want to infer whether they're actually independent, we have to observe that.
You not necessarily.
Okay.
If you can, for instance, let me give you an example. Suppose you know that, okay, you know something about this causal process, this generation process. Then you can always benefit from that, and you can easily derive this distribution without C from this one. However, generally speaking, you have to resort to some further assumptions. Is this the answer to your question? Okay, good. So now we have some typical or questions to answer, giving a causal representation. You are familiar with this one, prediction. Giving data, you want to make prediction. Basically, here a typical question is, this prediction relies on this conditional probability, right? For the sprinkler, for X3 to be off, what's the probability of some other variable, say slippery, X5. So prediction just relies on this distribution. Oh, sorry, you have a question.
Yeah. So similar like this. So I'm confused with manipulation and observation. Let's say
Good.
for very simple case X and Y, you want to study causality between X and Y, and I can easily get all possible observations like 0, 1. So let's assume they're all binary.
Yeah.
0, 1. So I can try only 4 combinations.
Yeah.
So if I get the joint probability of them, how can I interpret that as causality or just a joint distribution?
It's just a joint distribution. Yeah. Now we haven't really talked about causal discovery. We don't know how to discover causal information from purely observational data, the distribution table or joint distribution. We have no idea about it. So the first question is about observational data. You just make use of observational data. You observe this. You want to make prediction. This is observation. Or observing, right? You observe something, you want to say something about other variables given this particular situation. Now we can see the second one. Would the pavement be slippery if we make sure that sprinkler is off? This is very different. You do this.
Yeah, so for that simple case, you have 4 options. You can say I intervene the process. I try, I do.
Yeah.
I do set X equals to 1. So is that?
Yeah, you said you do. You may suppose this treatment, right? We just do this treatment. We want to see the effect. Is it different? Is this the same as a prediction? Remember Simpson paradox, right? Over there, you can see the positive correlation between treatment, or strange pattern of dependence between treatment and the recovery rate, right? However, if you do, things would be totally different.
Yeah, I have already tried all possible combinations I can do. So beyond this, what else can you do?
By all possible.
Yeah, I tried all possible combinations, 0, 1, 1, 0, something like that.
Yeah.
So if you want to get the blue equation there, what else you need to do?
You have to know, that's very good one. Let me just give an example. Unfortunately, we cannot write here. Suppose we have x, y. We know x causes y. We know data points. we have infinite number of data points. That means we have joint distribution of x, y. Now, for the first question, you just care about this. You only care about this. And for the second question, if you just care about that, you can make huge mistakes. Suppose x equals y. Now I ask you the following question. I want to see the distribution of x after I do manipulation on y. I set the value of y to y1. The first one, we answer this question. Probability of x given y equal y, right? Over here, you answer this question. No difficulty at all. You can make prediction. How can you answer this question? Although you have access to the true distribution. Suppose you have access to the true distribution for x, y. You have no idea about it. Why? With the same, suppose we consider linear Gaussian case. Linear relationship and Gaussian distribution. Now you can see, for this guy, for the same joint distribution, we can have this direction or this direction. The two causal things, this is first possibility, second possibility, they can generate exactly the same joint distribution for x and y. If you just consider prediction, there is no difference. But if you care about second question, they are totally different. Because in the first case, if I do intervention on y, the probability of x is just the same as before. It's not changed. Not changed at all. Why? If I do intervention on y, I cut this edge. This intervention will not change x at all. Right? But if x equals y corresponding to the same observational distribution, this is very different. Yeah. If y equals x, then this distribution will be different from before because I already set the cause to a particular value. Can you see that? For prediction, this is enough. For the second question, you have to make use of this on top of the distribution. That's why the second question, causal effect identification, is also known as observational studies of causal effects. Why? It's because you have to combine two things: causal representation and observe the distribution, observe the data points. This gives you the how you can formulate this, and then you can make use of the distribution you observe to derive that quantity. Is this clear?
Maybe I'll ask you later.
Okay, I will talk about this point in 2 minutes, I think. Okay. Second one is intervention.
Question. For the intervention, could you write down the results for two cases of x equals
Yeah, so
x equals y, y equals x?
very good. Case 1, x equals y. Just px. So whatever you observe will still be for x will still be the case because this will not be changed by the intervention at all. The second one is again, this is regular conditional distribution. It's well defined. Can you see why? Okay. This is again, this is the third condition. Remember, this is just the third condition. In the second case, I do intervention here. Then probability of x given parent y will be the same as before. That's why we have this. Okay. Second one is intervention. And we'll talk about intervention in several minutes. The last thing is the counterfactual. This is cool. In reality, we have to answer a lot of counterfactual questions. So we want to see the difference of different actions, and we want to see what would be the case in a different world. Suppose we have a lot of parallel worlds, right? We want to see all those potential outcomes in all those worlds, and then you can make the right decision. How can you formulate the problem? So given that here we are given something, we observe something. This already happened. Given the pavement is in fact not slippery and the sprinkler is on. This happens today. What would the pavement be slippery? head spring will be off. That means, although this happened, I want to go back in time. I want to do intervention. I want to see the effect. Now you can see something different. You can see, first of all, this question is related to the second question. Why? Because we always talk about intervention. Second of all, this is so different. Why? Okay, you want to say something? You have some. Okay. So the second point is that here we have more information, clearly much more information. Previously, we have no idea about how it looks today. We have no idea about the environment, right? But now we know we are talking about the same day, the same unit. We can make use of the additional information to answer this question better, to give a more precise answer. See that if you forget about this, if you just ignore this part, this is the interventional effect. But you can further benefit from this fact that already happened. Suppose we are talking about a particular person, right? Previously, we cannot talk about a particular person. We are talking about a population, a group of people, patients. Now with this, you are able to talk about a particular person because this can specify a particular person. Now you have more information. You can immediately get a lot of information. This is counterfactual. At some point, maybe I'll very briefly talk about the counterfactual. Make it very clear why they are different. I do intervention, condition. This is the interventional effect of this intervention, condition on this observation. Over here, we don't have a condition. We don't condition on the observations. Okay? Now, how can you identify the causal effect? I just solved the problem in a very simple case. More generally, how can you find the causal effect? So clear gold standard is to use randomized controlled experiments, very expensive, to see whether how this guy changed this guy, to see the causal effect of treatment on recovery. What can we do? Basically, we can fix all the other factors or just keep them at random, completely random. In this way, you can see any difference in recovery will be caused by the difference in treatment, because everything else, relevant things, has been either fixed or completely random, right? If this is the case, if we still find dependence between this guy and this guy in this case, clearly there's a causal effect. And you can further calculate the different quantities, different measures of causal effect, like average causal effect and so on. But ideally, you just need to keep everything, all the other features that might influence this guy fixed or random. This is so difficult. That's why we have a control and treatment group. Control and treatment group are different only in this. Over here, all the features are the same, and you just apply different treatments. So difficult, right? And this requires a lot of data points, a lot of participants. That's why we want to solve the problem by making use of the causal representation and observational data points. This is how we can solve the problem. Very simple example. We want to see the causal effect of treatment on recovery. We know how to represent the intervention. How? We just cut this edge. This condition will be the same, this will be the same. We just cut the edge to represent the intervention on treatment. Okay? Now, with the new graph, we can calculate the distribution of R giving the value of treatment to the treatment, say A or B. Now, with the new graph, manipulated graph, you can easily calculate this quantity. And this is different from the previous conditional distribution. For the conditional distribution, you have to consider conditional of x given t. They are dependent. Now we cut this edge. They become independent. And as a consequence, you can see we are going to find this line. Over here, A is better, B is better. We have average. But we take the average over S. Now it's not dependent on T, treatment anymore. That's why you can really see treatment A is better than B if you make use of the causal effect, not the dependence. right? So a very important problem in this field, research field, is whether this guy, condition distribution of the target variable, y. Yeah.
Can you repeat how do you cut that edge again?
So you want to see that when we say causal effect, basically it's the effect of the intervention on the variable x. How can we present intervention? You just cut the edge, right? If you apply intervention on x, you cut this edge, right? And then you have this new graph. You can derive the conditional distribution from that graph. Clear? So a very important problem is whether this guy is identifiable. In many situations, this is not identifiable. And actually, a lot of work is done by Pearl and Daniel Rubin and others. And at CMU, we are mainly doing causal discovery. We want to identify causal effect. Over here, you can see they always assume causal structure is given. By causal inference, usually they just mean identification of causal effects. How can you have the causal information, causal structure? That's more interesting to us. So we have been trying very hard to find the causal information from various kinds of data. So I just have several minutes. Then very quickly go through the idea. Causal effect. I already told you that this is one way to define causal effect. You do intervention, you have a distribution for y. This is the causal effect of x on y. And the problem is whether this is identifiable. Clearly, in this case, when we solve the problem, we have the distribution of s. We assume this is observed. We observe the stone size, right? If this is not observable, say this is a confounder. Confounder is the hidden direct common cause of two variables. If this is a confounder, can we still identify this guy? Clearly, we cannot. Why? Suppose everything is linear Gaussian for simplicity. Now you can see, with different values for this guy, I can always have the same distribution for x, y. I only observe x and y. I don't observe this guy. So, right, what I'm given is a causal graph with this as a confounder and the joint distribution of x and y. If the joint distribution is the same, it's not possible for me to derive different things from the joint distribution, right? But clearly, with different parameters here, parameter here, and parameter here, you can have clearly the causal effect would be different, right? That means the information is lost. In other words, it means the causal effect is not identifiable. This is the rigorous definition of identifiability. Basically, given the same graph and the same observational distribution, the distribution for the observed random variables, can you find a unique representation for the causal effect? And in that example, clearly we cannot, right? Because the information is completely missing. We can have the joint distribution for x, y corresponding to different causal mechanisms. Causal effect is about the causal mechanism. So the information of the causal mechanism is missing if stone size is a confounder, is missing or it's hidden. So then, actually, we have a number of criteria regarding whether causal effect is identifiable. Some of them are very intuitive. This is called the backdoor criterion. By backdoor here, you can see x1 and those things, kind of backdoor variables for xi relative to xj. That's why it's called backdoor criterion. And intuitively, just means that if there's a confounder here, then the effect of x on y, xi on xj cannot be identified. For the reason I just gave, right? Because for the same distribution, you can have different causal mechanisms. If this is the case, it's always non-identifiable. So I don't have time to talk about this. Skip this. If you are interested, you can read the slide or you can just talk to me. So some other criterion, and people try to unify the criterion. Okay, last part, understanding cycles. So you talk about a cyclic graph, right? Sometimes we have to make use of cyclic graph with cycles or feedback. What do they mean? Suppose we are talking about causality, right? What do you mean by cycle? What do you mean by feedback? Any idea?
I think like a really famous example is like when HIV was first being studied, like the immune cells were being attacked by the virus, but the more that it would attack, the less cells there were, and so then they couldn't produce as much virus, and so there was a back and forth.
Exactly. So we really have this. However, when I have a cycle, if you go back to the original variables in the process, as you said, we don't have cycle. Here, variables at t-1 influence variable t, and so on. So if you talk about those random variables in the process, they are no cycle, right? But as a compact representation, we can have cycles. Suppose this is alpha, 2 influence 1 with parameter alpha, 1 influence 2 with parameter beta. Then for simplicity, sometimes we just have a very rude representation, x1, x2, with cycles, with different parameters. But we know that actually, if you go back to the original process, it's not a cycle. And furthermore, you can see how we can have cycles in some other ways. If you're interested, just have a look at the slide. You'll see how you can understand the cycles discovered by different methods in terms of the original true causal process. And you can see some examples. This example is similar to what Octavia just said, price, demand. And okay, so I talked about the causal thinking, causal representation, and what we can benefit from causal representations. And interesting thing is how to discover causal information from data. A lot of people just simply assume it's given. Clearly, usually it's not the case, especially in this complex world. And another thing is causality-based learning. At some point, maybe next time I'll talk about that. Okay, thank you.